Good afternoon. This is our very last Lunch and Learn of 2022. The year has gone very fast. I am Amanda Lakin. I'm the Communications and Member Relations Manager with the Nevada Housing Coalition. And before we get started with our session today, I just had two quick announcements for you. The first one, we are very excited to share that we recently reached a milestone with our membership of 300 members. So we are very excited about this. When we ended 2019, we had only 47 members. So it's been really wonderful to see just over the past 3 years how much the coalition has grown, how much we've expanded our reach across the state and our impact on those who need affordable housing. So if you are a member of the coalition, I just want to say thank you. We appreciate each of you, and it's because of you that we get to continue doing this work. And second, I want to let everyone know that we have registration open for our 2023 Lunch and Learn series. We are going to be doing things a little bit differently next year. Instead of registering via Zoom like you did this year, we're actually going to have you register via our website on the event page, which I will drop the link in the chat here shortly. If you've attended our conference or any of the Elevate Nevada events, you will recognize the process. It's pretty easy. Once you are registered for the Lunch and Learn series, you'll be registered from January through September. And similar to what we did this year, we'll continue to just advertise our upcoming topics and speakers, as well as just sharing any updates on social media, in our newsletter, and via email. So please sign up. As you can see, we have a couple topics already in the works for the next couple months. And I do know that some of you, unfortunately, do have trouble with our website. It can be a little bit glitchy. So if you ever want to register for an event and are having trouble, please reach out to me directly and I can get you signed up very quickly. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our moderator for today's session, Elena Moulet. Elena is the Director of Community Development at Charles Schwab Bank. She's also the Secretary on the Board of Directors for the Nevada Housing Coalition. So in her current role with Charles Schwab, she helps plan the bank's community priority areas. She develops strategies to maximize impact in each of these areas. She helps measure the bank's community impact overall, and she collaborates with multi-sector partners to meet community goals. Welcome, Elena.
Thank you, Amanda, and thanks everyone for joining today. I'm really excited to be having this conversation. Charles Schwab Bank opened their doors in Reno over 20 years ago and has been investing in work in the state since that time. And I think many of you probably know my predecessor, Nancy Brown, who did a lot of work in this space as well. And our team, our community development team, focuses in affordable housing strategies, support for small businesses, and personal financial capability. And as we've evaluated the needs in the state and looked to make the most impact in these areas, one of the things that continually rose to the surface regarding our work was CDFI capacity in this state. And so we have put a stake in the ground in terms of trying to increase the CDFI capacity in the state, either by bringing new CDFIs to do work in the state or supporting existing CDFIs to have business development on the ground as well. So I was very excited. About 3 years ago, our bank moved their headquarters from Nevada to Dallas-Fort Worth and was very excited to begin learning about things happening in Dallas-Fort Worth that we could bring into Nevada. And one of the things that we learned about was CDFI Friendly, and learned that an organization was being stood up called CDFI Friendly Fort Worth. And since then, Charles Schwab Bank has been proud to be the first philanthropic funder into the new organization, CDFI Friendly Fort Worth. And we're currently funding CDFI Friendly America to do an assessment for Southern Nevada's readiness to have a CDFI friendly model that could also benefit all of Nevada eventually. And so that's the goal. And so I'm really excited to be having this conversation. Look forward to our collaborative efforts around this really important work and this important initiative, and hopefully all of us working together to continue solving for our community's housing challenges through innovative solutions. And I just a quick housekeeping and a run of show. I will have both Adina and Christine introduce themselves, and do about a 10-minute presentation, and then we will open it up for the facilitated discussion part of the event. So please feel free to put questions or discussion topics that you may have in the chat, and I will try to make sure that we prioritize as many questions as we can throughout the discussion. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Adina Abramowitz.
How many years have we been doing Zoom? And I'm like still having to remember to unmute. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me to be here today. And thank you for your interest in a new strategy that we're trying to bring to the CDFI world. CDFI, as someone asked, stands for Community Development Financial Institution, which is a designation that the Treasury Department bestows on an organization if it meets a whole slew of criteria. But as it might be intuitive, the mission of the organization has to be community development, and the main focus has to be finance. So there are about 1,400 of them in the country, and we were invited by Schwab Bank to come to Clark County, Southern Nevada, and to figure out if it would be a good place for CDFI Friendly Strategy. So what is the CDFI Friendly Strategy? It's a new approach to bringing CDFIs to different areas that are poorly served. So even though there are 1,400 certified CDFIs in the United States, many, many areas are poorly served. And by poorly served, we mean maybe there's no CDFIs at all in your area. Maybe there's just one. Maybe there's only one type or serving one sector, like only doing small business and not affordable housing, or only doing consumer and not doing small business or affordable housing. All of these things are valid things for a CDFI to do, but your community doesn't have everything it needs in terms of accessing capital. So our strategy is to create a local CDFI friendly entity that solves the CDFI's problem in terms of lending in areas that are not where they are located. CDFIs are most comfortable when they have lots of market knowledge and where they have feet on the ground and they can go touch the collateral, they can go visit the borrower. And so that's very limiting in terms of where they can serve. So this is a strategy that gets over those issues by having two tools. One is staff that helps organize the market and create the pipeline for the CDFI that maybe is in the next state over, or maybe it's a regional CDFI or a national CDFI out of a completely other place. And then also a credit enhancement fund that allows the CDFI friendly entity to have skin in the game and help the external CDFIs manage their risk and feel like there's a local organization that's really committed to the project. So we start, CDFI Friendly America is a partnership between Mark Pinsky, who many of you may have heard of, and myself. We've both been in the CDFI industry for a very long time. And we've been working on this for about 3-4 years. Of course, most of those years were COVID time. And we currently have operations standing up in Bloomington, Indiana, South Bend, Indiana, and then Christine invited us to Fort Worth. So we finally busted out of Indiana and have an operation in Fort Worth, Texas, that's being stood up right now. And we are organizing new efforts in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Next year, we'll be working in Evansville. I'm sorry, that shouldn't be Illinois, Indiana, and Jacksonville, Florida. So that's where we are. So these are the stages that we go through to create a CDFI friendly entity, 4 stages. So in Clark County, we've done the first one, assess and outreach. We have yet to start the other 3 stages. So we're gathering stakeholders and gathering interest and gathering financial resources, hopefully do the other 3 stages, which are organize and educate, write a business plan, and then implement. The goals of a CDFI assessment process is to determine an area's readiness to become a CDFI friendly community and to surface any issues that could affect the success of the effort. Every place is different. Certain problems are the same everywhere and certain things are unique to each place. So understanding what are those unique issues that we need to pay close attention to is very important. So we went through this process in the late summer and early fall, where Elena and her group formed a steering committee, provided us with gobs of materials, which we analyzed. We did a site visit. We met with 15 leaders in person. We did one-on-one interviews with another 13 leaders, and then we presented our findings and conclusions. So what we learned is, yes, it is true that Clark County is underserved. you see that number circled in yellow. This is a statistic we pay very close attention to, is how many dollars per person have CDFIs invested in a given geography. So in the United States, the average of all the CDFI investments made between 2005 and 2020 divided by the whole population, the number is 325. We're not saying that's a good number or it's sufficient, but that's what the number is. And in Clark County, it's about a third of that. And then if you look all the way over on the left in North Las Vegas, the place that has the most percentage of census tracts that are eligible for CDFI and has the most socioeconomic challenges, the number is really low, 57. So yes, you're underserved. So that's the first thing we want to know is, are you underserved? Then when we did our interviews, some of our high-level findings include that there is some CDFI activity. There is a couple local CDFIs. There's a few CDFIs from nearby states that have been dedicated to Clark County for a long time, like New West and Clearinghouse CDFI. And there's a new CDFI called Access Capital that's working on small business, but it's not nearly enough. And there's nothing going on in the consumer category at all. And everybody we spoke to expressed the need for more CDFI activity, not just the lending side, but the knowledge side as well. And we found that there were lots and lots of opportunities that we could see just from driving around and learning from our hosts, that there were many, many ways that we could leverage debt to make more projects happen or to spread government subsidy further and use it more effectively. So some of the challenges we found, while affordable housing is very much needed and the numbers are very indicative of a high level of need of affordable housing, very few tools have been used to date. There's mostly LIHTC and Habitat for Humanity is what we heard about. And there's lots of while those are dominant ways of making affordable housing happening in many places, there's other things that could be tried. We also heard a lot about the desire to diversify the economy beyond gaming, and that's happening both in Las Vegas and in the surrounding communities. We heard lots and lots of stories about predatory consumer lending, especially auto lending, and the need for fair consumer lending. We heard lots of stories about all the different ways that racial economic disparities show up with each of the different communities in its own unique way. And we heard a lot about lack of communication and collaboration between the private and the public sectors, which limits the ability for some creative things to happen. So those were our high-level findings. And we did purposefully did interviews in each of the different parts of Clark County, unincorporated Clark County, and the city of Las Vegas, the city of North Las Vegas, the city of Henderson, and found that there were many themes across all of the area that would be indicative of being a good place for CDFI friendly. So the area is booming, economic diversification is beginning to happen, but many are not yet benefiting from these changes. Poverty is still concentrated in certain places. There's not great public transportation. Where the people live and where the jobs are often very far apart, hence the auto lending problem. Lots of small businesses not getting the opportunity to grow, all sorts of things. We heard all these stories. And affordable housing is indeed a bigger need in Clark County than many places, especially true for extremely low-income people. I know I'm probably not telling you anything you don't know, but it was Las Vegas itself has one of the highest levels of need for housing for extremely low-income population in the whole country. And that it would seem like resources are limited everywhere, and that CDFI capital and expertise could be part of a solution to support more inclusive growth. So we really think there's definitely demand for more CDFI financing for all sectors, for affordable housing, for micro and small business, for consumer, for lending to nonprofits. And there's some helpful things that are happening that could make that even more so. For example, Henderson and Las Vegas are beginning to understand that one of the approaches to increasing the availability of affordable housing is to increase density, and that's starting to happen, and that will allow for some new kinds of projects. We see Access Capital coming out of the gate really quickly with lots of small business loans, and that probably, as much as they're doing, there's probably even more that they can't get to, and they're trying to serve the whole state. So there's probably lots more that could be done in the small business arena. And then many deals are not even considering debt, and that's making the projects take longer and cost more. So educating nonprofits and housing developers about how to use fair and patient capital, and then showing them how it could be done, could increase, I think, inclusive growth as well. So because of all that, we definitely recommend moving forward with the other stages. So what's next? This is what we do in each of the other phases and organize. That's basically an effort to increase the number of people who understand what a CDFI is, what it can do, what is a CDFI friendly strategy, and develop a list of real CDFI deals that could possibly be done. After that, we create an actionable business plan with a market analysis, an operational plan, a capitalization plan, and financial projections. And we do this in a very iterative way where we get lots of community feedback and by the end, consensus and support. And then we go forward to actually implement, adopting a strategy, creating a board of directors, creating the nonprofit corporation, developing and adapting lending policies, hiring the executive director. And throughout the last three stages, we're doing CDFI matching all throughout. We're matching potential borrowers with CDFIs, which Christine can tell you about how we've done that in Fort Worth. So we believe that we could do between 100 and 200 million in new CDFI financing in Clark County in the next 5 years, some in each sector, if we start CDFI friendly. And there would be some other benefits as well, but I see I'm running over my time. So I'm going to just let you see who we spoke with on our site visit, all fascinating people, and then also who we spoke with virtually. If the slides can be made available afterwards, you can take a look at that list more closely. So I'm going to stop there and give it back to Elena. Thank you.
Thanks, Adina. That was a really nice overview of what you've done to date in Clark County and learned about Nevada. And I'm curious, I know you presented the 4 stages of the CDFI friendly model, and I was wondering if you could briefly elaborate on why those pieces are critically important, like especially the community engagement piece and how you came to develop the model and why it works.
Great. And I see Christine nodding, so she might be able to elaborate on how it actually happened in Fort Worth. Basically, we're trying to get people to believe that things that are not possible today could be possible. So the affordable housing development that your community has yearned for 20 years, but hasn't happened because of lack of financing, we might be able to make that happen. Or for the small business owner who's wanted to open a second location or has wanted to improve their location, that hasn't been possible because the only thing they could get was hard money lending at ridiculous percent. No, we're going to find a fair lender to make you the loan. So to make people understand that things that weren't possible before are now possible, it takes a lot of conversations. And it takes a lot of convening. It takes a lot of people to open their minds to new ideas. So that's why the organizing is so important. And that results in lots more support for CDFI Friendly, which is critical because what CDFI Friendly is basically, it's kind of like a matchmaker. It's kind of like Cupid for CDFIs. It's a matchmaker between the potential borrowers and the potential lenders. And so we need lots of referral sources. We need lots of people who believe in us. And that's why the organizing part is so important. Then the business planning is the practical part. Let's figure out how we're actually going to do it. And then the very first time we did CDFI Friendly, we wrote in Bloomington, we wrote the business plan and we were like, here, go do it. Well, and then it just sort of sat on a shelf for close to a year because they didn't have the go do it chops or time I mean, all the people who are involved in CDFI Friendly are important, busy people. So we realize we have to incorporate that into the model where we actually help with the implementation and the hire and the bylaws and all that stuff. So those are why the 4 stages are important.
Thank you. And I'm seeing a couple questions come in, and I am seeing Christine nod her head a whole lot. So I'm wondering if we should save all of our questions for after until we hear from Christine, because I think seeing an example of how this model came into practice and what has been successful in another community will help really elucidate this for all of us, and then we can dive into some of the discussion. So Christine, if you would be so kind as to introduce yourself and then jump into your material for us.
Sure. Thank you so much, Elena. And for everyone who has joined, my name is Christina Brooks. I'm the Chief Equity Officer with the City of Fort Worth and the Director of the Department of Diversity and Inclusion. And so our role from a city's perspective really kind of came to light during COVID, right? I was familiar with CDFI Friendly America from my time in South Bend. And so I knew what they were capable of when it comes to access to capital. But in Fort Worth, we had a pretty unique situation because most people don't associate the North Texas region where it's home to a lot of large financial institutions as being a particular area that, CDFIs might be necessary. But during COVID, we saw that a lot of our small businesses in our ecosystem were really struggling to keep their heads above water. And we had a large influx of federal funding through the CARES Act. And initially during that time in 2020, we had about $54 million that we used to provide direct financial support to small businesses. The problem with that is that once that money was given away in grants and forgivable loans, it was gone, right? And we were still kind of looking at the same challenges and issues that most cities around the country are dealing with. And so when we had the opportunity through a second infusion of cash from the federal government through the American Recovery Plan Act, or ARPA, we wanted to do something different, right? We wanted to build a more sustainable way to address access to capital issues that we were facing in the city. And it wasn't just, looking at supporting small businesses anymore, but we collaborated across several departments in the city and looked at some of the issues like affordable housing, homelessness, and permanent supportive housing, how we could address some gaps in financing for major redevelopment projects around the city. And of course, consumer loans, mortgages, and auto and alternatives to payday lending, all of that alongside small business loans. And so we looked at CDFI Friendly America as a model that could really address all of those issues. And when you were talking about making sure that the community is involved, that was a major part of the work that we were doing. And we knew that we needed community support for this to be a sustainable program. And so we had heard from people in the small business community through our Minority and Women Business Enterprise Disparity Study. We had reached out to developers in our Economic Development Strategic Plan. And then the city has a comprehensive plan, which is like a fancy word for all the plans in the city from city departments that involve capital or some type of funding from either the federal government or state funding or local tax revenues. And so we looked at all of that and brought CDFI Friendly America in. We gave them about, the city's initial investment was $3 million to kind of set it up. And we were looking at addressing all of those issues and making sure that our steering committee and ultimately our executive board that would become CDFI Friendly Fort Worth were made up of people from the community. We wanted to hand this over to the community so that this program would not sit in a municipal government department or office, that this would completely be community driven and community led based on the needs that they would assess on an annual basis. And so that's what we've done. And we've had some really good, we believe, some really good early wins there. We went from having one physical CDFI in town in a city of almost 1 million people that was had about $10,000 to lend. And I said 10,000, not 10 million, but $10,000 to lend in a city of almost 1 million people. So you can imagine there was a lot of unmet need. And so with this model, accessing over 1,400 CDFIs from all over the country, Fort Worth was kind of a very fertile financial investment because we're growing rapidly. We've got some major companies and organizations moving to Fort Worth. And so we went from having one physical CDFI, and through the CDFI Friendly Fort Worth model, we have now over 20 CDFIs that are actively involved in lending deals across a number of different areas, from small business loans to consumer lending to mortgages, auto loans, all those areas that we wanted to address. And so we're closing in at the end of this year, looking at about 10 million, almost $10 million in new financing in our marketplace, which has just kind of blown all of us away. And we're really excited to see what it's going to look like into the future. And we know that we're in good hands because right now we just hired an executive director for CDFI Friendly Fort Worth. And I've already met with him, and he has met with and sits on the CDFI Friendly Fort Worth board. So he is a local. He is born and raised here. He has a background in finance. So he has a pretty unique understanding of what the community needs are, but he also understands how to connect with traditional financing institutions as well as CDFIs. So that's kind of our story here in Fort Worth, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that, Christina. The first question I want to pose, I think to both of you, because I think you will have very different answers, is how do you build the trust of the community to come along with you? And I want to ask you, you can speak to multiple audiences, but I in particular would like for each of you to touch upon existing CDFIs that are doing work in these communities, and how does this model benefit those who are already doing this work?
Why don't you go first, Christina, because you definitely dealt with that.
Yeah. So like I said, we had one physically located here and probably about 2 others that were had some deals happening in the Fort Worth marketplace. But literally, when we brought CDFI Friendly America to the table and started leveraging the 1,400 CDFIs from all over the country and introducing them to the fertile ground, it kind of lit a match under our local CDFIs, and they've developed partnerships, right, where it's kind of a win-win for us. At least the one that was physically located here in Fort Worth was almost a little happy to see that there were other CDFIs that were coming into our space, because they were having a hard time making the case to their board that there was this need out there, and it was much, much greater than the $10,000 that they had available. And so seeing how quickly other CDFIs were able to complete deals across a number of different areas, we saw it kind of lit a fuse. And when other CDFIs came to town, everybody was kind of in a almost a little bit of a feeding frenzy, like trying to figure out, okay, how can we lend more, and how can we actually work in the areas where we've been either unserved or underserved. And I think that's why we've seen such a groundswell of support, not only from people in the community and borrowers, but also in financial institutions that are here that really, it just wasn't really on their radar until we brought attention to it. And it became almost a national, a national story about all of the need that is here, and what can be done, and it's profitable, right? Sometimes, and I know Adina can probably speak to this a little more, that the assumption is that CDFIs aren't looking to turn a profit or make money, and that's not the case, right? This is not a grant, right? These are lending opportunities, and sometimes we had to do some work to dispel some of those myths around lending to unserved populations, where it's a risky investment, and you don't know if you're going to make your money back. But the good thing about this model is that we do our due diligence, and we make sure that when we connect a potential borrower to a CDFI, that they're ready, right? And if they're not, then we have avenues to support them so that they can be ready for a lending opportunity.
I'm sure there's lots of other questions. I think Christina did a great job on that. So maybe we'll move on to another one, Elena.
Great. I was wondering if either of you could share an example of a project that has been funded using this model in affordable housing specifically.
Sure. So I'm not going to remember all the details, but in Bloomington, two CDFIs from outside Bloomington came together to fund a new cooperatively owned rehabilitation of an old building. I believe it was part of a hospital. And one of them, there was a CDFI named Sinair, which does work in Indiana, but had never been in Bloomington before. They were the first CDFI that was in, but they couldn't do 100% of what was needed. And then a very specialized CDFI from Boston that focuses on housing co-ops called LEAF, that honestly, I didn't even know they still existed. They had been around for a long, long time. I hadn't heard about them in years, and they came in and filled that little gap. And so that's an example of a rehab. There's a very specialized population that lives in the building. It's like a win-win on so many levels. And that would never have happened without Brian, the local director of CDFI Friendly Bloomington, pulling together all the pieces and getting the people to talk to each other and searching out CDFIs that nobody knew still existed, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one story.
Thank you. And Adina, I see a question in the chat related to how this could support other parts of Nevada. And so I'm curious if you could talk to, I know you've spoken a lot about the research that was done in Clark County, but how could this model benefit the entire state?
Well, I mean, once CDFIs are, come to a place like right now, Nevada's not on is not on most national CDFIs radar screen. But once they come to Clark County, they're going to hear about dealers in Reno. They're going to hear about deals in other parts of the state. And once they've got that mentality of, I've figured out some aspects of Nevada. If there's any legal requirements, I've met those legal requirements. There's no reason they wouldn't also lend in other parts of the state. So, and then, they're going to meet folks like yourselves, and they're going to meet people who are part of the Nevada Housing Coalition, and they're going to find out about deals in other parts of the state. And honestly, CDFIs don't really care that much about geographic distinctions. They care about good deals. They're economic actors, not geographic actors.
And Christina, I have a question for you related to Fort Worth. I know you've spoken about the funding that the city provided to help get this work and this model off the ground. We're hopeful maybe that could happen in Nevada. So far, that's not the position that we're in. And so I'm curious if you could talk about other funders or other stakeholders whose involvement was important as we think about a more multi-sector approach to launching this project.
Yeah, so the great thing about this model is it is inclusive of larger traditional financing institutions providing the seed funding for an endeavor like this. And there are a lot of, in addition to that, there are a lot of large foundations that could provide the initial seed money to get this type of program off the ground. We have here in North Texas, we have probably about a handful of large foundations like the Rainwater Foundation, North Texas Community Foundation, that does provide large dollar grants for initiatives that build some type of sustainable economic improvement zones, or that address a very specific need, like some of the ones that I had mentioned. So I would encourage you to look at those avenues as well. There are some, traditional lenders have CRA requirements that they have to meet, right? And so that might also be an opportunity with some tweaking. Now, every state is different. And there are different laws that may be applicable in different areas, but it's a starting point. And even outside of a CRA type initiative, there are opportunities for some of your large banks like Bank of America or Wells Fargo, some international banks and institutions that could provide the funding. And if not, you have those large foundations and nonprofits that may be able to provide the seed funding.
Thank you. And one follow-up question for you, Christina. What is the most innovative partnership that you've seen emerge from the CDFI Friendly work in Fort Worth so far?
Oh, I have an example, but I can't share it because it hasn't been released yet. But I will tell you that it is a tech innovation that yeah, I don't know if I could say anything more than that because I don't want. I promised I'd keep my mouth shut. But yeah, there's
the smokeaholic story. That's a great story.
Oh yeah, okay. So that's another one. So we have a local small business owner that's literally like not too far from my office in Fort Worth that had a barbecue, started out as like a catering company. And he actually was working with one of our, who became a board member, and now he is chair of the CDFI Friendly Fort Worth, had been working with him one-on-one to kind of stabilize his business plan, and reached out to a CDFI Friendly Fort Worth for a match and a loan, and he received the funding. He now has a physical location. It is constantly packed, and it's hard to get in there now. But we definitely consider that a success story because he started out as being kind of a mom and pop organization, and now he employs multiple people in the community. It's become kind of a stabilizing force in a traditionally underserved community in Fort Worth. And now he's looking at opening several locations in different areas. So that was kind of a from 0 to 100 kind of transformation through funding and finance through the CDFI Friendly model.
Thank you so much, Christina. And Adina, any last words before I close this out?
Well, some in the chat, I noticed some people were asking about existing CDFIs and also how do you start a CDFI? And I just want to say that, yes, that's another option for Clark County. You could start your own CDFI. That takes 2 to 3 years, and then you end up with a CDFI that lends in one sector. We're trying to bring the power of all the different CDFIs, all the different kinds of lending to a place where all of those things are always needed. The car loans and the consolidating debt loans and the affordable housing giant loans and the mortgages, and all those things are needed everywhere. So starting a CDFI is not a bad idea, but you'll get a lot more leverage out of this idea. This is cheaper, quicker, and more comprehensive.
And Adina, I also saw a question in the chat about how that matchmaking process actually happens. And is it correct that this is the community engagement process and this is the importance of having a staffed organization from the community?
Exactly. So it's the fact that each person who's been successful at this has been hired who was already known to the community. So in South Bend, it was a person who headed the biggest Latino social service organization came and ran CDFI Friendly South Bend. And in Fort Worth, it's going to be this gentleman who, it hasn't been announced yet, but he's very well known in the community as well. And they, basically it's just talking to the CDFIs. What do you like? What don't you like? What kind of deals do you do? How much? How long does it take you to decide? Talk till you really understand it. And then talk to the borrowers like, well, no, I can be patient. I don't need the loan right away. Or no, I needed the loan yesterday. That might change who you refer it to. And then following up and making sure people don't get lost between the cracks. That's what the staff person does. Advocates on both sides, creates the pipeline for the CDFIs, and advocates for the borrower with the CDFIs.
Well, I know we're about over time, and I want to make sure that I close us out not too far over. So Adina and Christina, thank you so much for sharing about your experiences, sharing about your model. I'm really excited to be a part of this. I know the Nevada Housing Coalition is as well and is a partner on this work. And I would invite everyone on this webinar to please join us as we think about what tremendous opportunity we may have here to advance economic development issues in the state of Nevada. So if anyone has follow-up questions or wants to be involved, I know you can reach out to Christine or Amanda or myself, and we can get you connected with the efforts that are happening on the ground right now. So thank you all very much. I hope everyone has a really wonderful holiday season with friends and family, and we look forward to seeing you at upcoming Lunch and Learn starting in 2023.